No matter who you are or where you go, heading outside even for a few minutes is always worth it. I'm your host, Amy Bouchatz, and here at Humans Outside, we're using the Humans Outside 365 Challenge to build a life around spending time in nature while hearing from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. As a journalist for 19 years, I've let curiosity be my guide. After my husband's injuries from military service, we started looking for a better way to live. That's why we moved sight unseen to Alaska to see if an outdoor-focused life was the answer. Since September 2017, I've personally spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what, to explore how nature can change my life. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! Here at Humans Outside, we've talked to over 100 guests about what makes heading outside for them special, what they find there, what they do there, how it helps them, and their advice for you. We head outside for every reason imaginable, and nature has it all. But one of the things I've never explored here on Humans Outside is how spending time outside can help those who are tackling life with an autism diagnosis. Today's guest idea came from you. Podcast fan Aaron hit me up through the humansoutside.com contact form and suggested I reach out to Ian and Eve Alderman, the dad and daughter pair behind My Spectrum Adventures. Both Ian and Eve are on the autism spectrum, and Ian and his wife Sarah are helping Eve navigate her world by hiking outside while raising funds for autism awareness and support from their home in Scotland. And they spend a lot of time outside. These are not people with small goals. For 2023, they've set out to tackle all 1,900 miles over 29 trails as they backpack all of Scotland's great trails. Sometimes that means camping out. Sometimes it means nights in hotels or hostels or homes of people who are helping them. Sometimes it means heading back home to their own home at night. I'm so incredibly honored that Ian is joining me today during a trail break to talk about, their spectrum adventures, how spending time outside aids them on their life journey, and what other neurodivergent humans may be able to find by spending more time outside. Ian, welcome to Humans Outside.
Hello there, how are you?
Oh, I am so good. Thank you so much for joining me. I am in Alaska, you're in Scotland, so this is a very international call. It still amazes me that we can do this. We kick off all of my episodes of Humans Outside imagining our guests in one of their favorite outdoor spaces, like we're hanging out with you somewhere that you love, having this conversation. So if we were going to be not in our respective indoor locations right now, where would we be with you?
I would probably, living where we live, I'd have probably done a nice small walk, nothing major, a few miles, probably up into the forests behind us, and just find a nice little dry flat spot, and we'd just sit there, nice little vista in front of us, maybe a wee cloud inversion as the cloud drops down over the trees, and we'll just get a camping stove out and brew up a nice cup of tea, because I am British, or coffee in America, and brew up a nice warm drink and just sit there and enjoy it, to be honest, and just sip on that and just put the worlds to rights.
No argument for me.
So that's probably what I'd be doing.
Love it. Okay, so can you start by telling us a little bit about your incredible family, you, your wife Sarah, and Eve, of course. Where do you live? Tell us about you guys.
Well, we're actually English, although we live in Scotland. We can't all be born perfect. So we moved to Scotland in 2010. And yeah, we moved there for jobs and employment originally, and it kind of went from there. We all did the usual 9 to 5 working. I run a business. Sarah was a teacher, and it just went from there. And then even Sarah got ill, like really ill. Sarah had cancer, and at the same time Eve got diagnosed with a tumour on her back as well, and her life expectancy was 48 hours at one point. And we got told we wouldn't be taking her home again. So we were getting life geared up for me being a single man again, and luckily that never happened. Caused a bit of a inward review of life and ourselves and our family and all that sort of stuff. From there we confronted some of the stuff within me that I hadn't really wanted to before, and that led down the whole route of autism, and I eventually went through the diagnosis. But Eve actually got the diagnosis before me, so Eve actually went and got her diagnosis, and then I went, it was about a year or two afterwards, because obviously there's a bit of a waiting list, and because obviously we've got the NHS, which is all kind of a bit of a different system, I think, to what you've got over in the States. So we went through the National Health Service and got a diagnosis, but mine came after Eve's. Sarah and Eve are obviously all clear, they're all fine health-wise. We went and got the autism diagnosis, and then we went into COVID lockdown, which was a really difficult phase. I mean, it really was quite challenging because we're naturally outdoors anyway as a family. We always have been as much as we can, and we were actually on trail at the time when Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister at the time, announced the first national lockdown. So we had to get off trail and yada yada yada. So yeah, I think we could go on quite a lot, but I think that probably about sums the historical aspect of it. And here we are now, post COVID, out of lockdown, and trying to live life as much as we possibly can, really.
So, how Eve was an infant when you found her tumor. She was 1, if I remember reading that correctly, about 1 years old.
Yeah, she was just over 18 months ish, and she went through a period of quite severe ill health. She was in the children's ward, I think it was 3 times prior to that, and it was, I don't want to say a misdiagnosis, but it wasn't diagnosed, and eventually we went there. My wife, for all intents and purposes, had a breakdown in the doctor's surgery, and we were advised to take her straight to the Children's Hospital down in Glasgow. We did that. They got her in within about 2 days or so. They gave her a general anaesthetic, gave her a full scan, and they found the tumour in her back on her spine. So yeah, and then obviously Sarah had hers as well.
Yeah, she is 9 years old now and healthy.
Yes, 9 years old, fully healthy. It's all historic. She barely remembers any of it, which is just as well, and so that's good. And so Sarah, she went through her operations, and that's all clear. And so yeah, all fit, strong, and healthy. And we're looking forward to what the rest of our lives will bring.
Yeah. And Eve was how old when she received her autism diagnosis?
She was about 4 or 5 years old, just preschool, and then my diagnosis came a year or so after that. So she was actually quite young, which is quite rare, especially for children in general, and especially girls. But Sarah, she's actually a high school teacher by trade, and she'd actually done specialist training in neurodivergent education and little statement to children, so whether it be autism, ADHD, etc., so special sort of needs. So she kind of knew what to look out for a lot more, so she noticed a lot more the traits quicker than probably we might have done otherwise, or certainly faster than I ever would have done. So
autism is, of course, the spectrum's in the title of what you have coined, what you do, but it's on a quote-unquote spectrum because of how it looks for each person and how widely that can differ. So can you tell me, how does autism look for Eve and how does it look for you?
Well, I think, like I said, it's a spectrum, and everyone who has autism sits on that spectrum. Now, I don't know technically how we in the UK define it compared to what you do in the States, although I think a lot of the technical diagnosis that the UK use links in with them over in the States, and there's a lot of cross-referencing and working together on the science of it all, but it's all different for everybody. So there is a saying that if you meet one person with autism, you met one person with autism, because everyone else is going to be totally different. I mean, there's the likes of me that is, albeit bricking it, coming on, doing a live chat, being recorded with someone I technically don't know, etc. And it's a scary process, but I'll still do it. Yet there's other people that are just locked in the house, they don't communicate, or they can't communicate, and it's truly life altering, life limiting. And then there's obviously the mental health aspect of it. I mean, undiagnosed females are 9 times more likely to commit suicide, for example. So there's a massive mental health side of it as well. So it's not, the autism is one thing, but obviously there's a mental health aspect attached to it. Anyway, I'm digressing. I do apologise. I tend to go off on a bit of a tangent sometimes. It's more along the lines, certainly at the moment, of social interaction. So Eve misreads a lot, and her ability to make friends and all that sort of stuff is difficult and challenging. So it tends to be more that. Obviously, there's all the other quintessential stuff that tends to come along with it. Certainly for Eve, there are tics, there are sort of repetitive movements, certain types of behaviour, very sort of fixated on rules, on being quite regimented with stuff. If we say we're going to go at 7 o'clock, we go at 7 o'clock and not a minute after. That sort of stuff. So she's quite like that, but she's certainly not as far on the spectrum as some people are. And I can be like that, but for me, it's definitely more of the social side of it. And the one thing that I think we do share to an extent, although in slightly different ways, is a sense of becoming kind of overwhelmed with stuff, whether it be noises or just too much going on. And certainly in modern life, there's a lot going on. Even looking at this iPhone screen, the amount that's going on, and it's every time the clock ticks the seconds, I'm seeing it flash, and it's a lot, and it's exhausting. Everything about it is exhausting, but in a way that I can only experience through autism. There's nothing else I can do that gives a sense of exhaustion like when you're confronting aspects of autism, because it's totally different. It totally wipes you in every possible conceivable way you can think of. So, yeah, I think that... Does that answer the
yes,
question?
it answers the question.
I hope so.
It makes me think about how we know, obviously, here at Humans Outside, we think that going outside is good for everybody, that it's like a whole life, whole health solution to so many problems of every single person, whether you are neuronormative or neurodivergent or whatever you're dealing with, your emotional, whatever, going outside is great for that. So I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about what differences you notice in Eve when you're spending massive time outside versus when she's just inside dealing with this.
Eve being outdoors is a fundamentally different human. She is totally different. Now, the autism and the issues that she has are still there, but they're considerably less and they're more manageable, and she has more confidence. You just see her come alive. It's where she wants to be. She asks to be. We don't force her, we don't make her, we don't push her. She has a veto and everything. But she knows it's good. She likes it because she can just be herself. So she'll walk along the trail and you'll hear us before you see us, because she'll be singing. And at the moment we're singing Christmas songs quite loudly and out of tune. But you know what? So what? And it's good, and that's who she is. And it doesn't matter about what action she does or she doesn't do. And it helps because it's less regimented, it's less structured, and it forces us to think kind of differently as well, because as you know, being outdoors, you can't predict it. You can't really know what's going to happen or where the right place is going to come into for a break, or I don't know. So she is different she's just different. She's happy, she's outgoing, she's confident. She is just plain different. Yet when we're indoors, we struggle with a lot of things. It's not so much behaviour, because she's not a bad kid, but she doesn't have that level of confidence, that outgoing behaviour, as she does when she's outdoors. It's just, we call it a happy place, and it really is. And it's where she wants to be and where she feels that she belongs, and luckily so do we. So it kind of works.
Do you see those things that help her outside, that confidence and that freedom, changing who she is when she comes back inside and helping her develop? Because as much as people like you and I would love to spend all of our time outside, that's not the modern life, right? So do you see all this time spent outside as helping her become a more, I don't know, don't want to say better version, because she's great as she is, but develop inside?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, obviously she's a child, she's naturally growing, she's mature, and she's learning about the world. But I think the process of being outside and what we're doing and how we're doing it will naturally breed confidence and becoming outgoing and learning about yourself, challenging what you think you can do and the limits you've got, and pushing yourself. So yes, it does. It impacts massively, hugely. And as we were speaking about just before we sort of started this, about all the science that backs up being outdoors and the effects it has mentally, psychologically, emotionally, about the levels of cortisol and all these sort of trigger hormones, etc., and how it can help regulate, balance them. So it helps anyone, but certainly for people who are more sensitive to stimuli, that's especially modern, with all the lights and the cameras and everything else that's going on in vehicles and noise, and it helps tremendously. I mean, massively. I mean, more than I think people kind of realize until you get into these sort of situations and you get yourself out there and you learn to embrace it and you learn to realize what outdoors is like, because it's not all Instagram worthy perfect moments. And it is hard, it is tough. And when you're getting battered by the wind and the rain and the snow and all the rest of it, and you're knackered and you're running late and the light's fading, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're autistic or not, you've got to deal with it. And you learn strategies and you learn ways. And in my opinion, you probably learn it in the best way you can because you're in outdoors, because it's natural, it's normal, it's what we are predisposed to be doing as animals. And I think that it helps tremendously in every possible way, hence why we'll commit ourselves to spending as much time as we possibly can outdoors, walking, canoeing, swimming, or whatever that may be, because the benefits are humongous and you can see it so clearly.
Hey humans, just a quick break to remind you that if you want to build your own outdoor habit, the Humans Outside 365 Challenge is a great way to get started. Cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher medal and a decal, is waiting for you. All you need to do is visit humansoutside.com/challenge. Don't get left out. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Okay, back to the show. You really do spend as much time as you can outdoors. You are out there hiking 6 days a week, if I understand, and with about a day off in between. So you're out there, you're doing the thing, you're hiking the hikes, you're backpacking. How do you handle Eve's schooling?
Well, for us, it's kind of a lifestyle choice. So it's an adjustment. Now, Eve is homeschooled, and obviously we're quite lucky in the UK to be able to do that, because obviously some of the laws around the world, even in Europe, are quite strict on it. But obviously we are quite lucky in living in quite a liberal democracy, so we can do this. Sarah's a teacher by trade, so it helps, but it is by no means a requirement to be able to successfully home educate, to be a teacher, have a degree, or even be that intelligent, to be perfectly honest, because there's so many resources, so much help out there. So we do it as we're going, and we do carry some resources with us. I do carry, for example, a tablet. As much as I don't like technology, it has a place and it has a purpose, and like it or not, that is the modern world and it has to be embraced. So we do carry that, and we use that for whether it be audio books or downloading visual books that we can read, so she can learn obviously how to read, numbers, etc. We do it as we're going. We see information boards, we'll read it, we'll break it down. We do it as we're walking. We'll be doing maths and multiplications and talking about sight words and spellings and letter sounds and science, and the list just sort of goes on. And it's actually quite easy when you get into it and you start thinking about it, to integrate it into what you're doing on a daily basis anyway, because it doesn't have to be this big massive hoo-ha when you sit down with textbooks and print-offs and whiteboards and all this other sort of Gucci stuff, because it's, you know what I mean, at Eve's age it's relatively basic stuff. Now I'm sure the time will come when we'll need to sit down and we'll really need to really work out stuff if we're going through Pythagoras theorem or physics and all the way, and really, do you know what I mean? There'll come that time, and we're trying to prepare for that anyway. I'm sort of reading up on physics and God knows what else to try to get myself a bit more clued up for it. But I mean, in the UK, there's IGCSEs, which are internationally renowned. I know that they do them in China and various other places at international schools, and that goes through one of the British awarding bodies, which is internationally recognised, etc. So it's all there, and all the resources are there. So we kind of do it as we're going. It's integrated into daily life. We learn as we go, and we change our approaches if required. I mean, he's really into reading at the moment, so we're really drumming into that as much as we possibly can. So only the other day we were sat down drinking a cup of tea, and we got the tablet out, and we were doing words and stuff. So it's quite simple. And then when you actually look at what they do in primary school and you work out the actual time they spend learning compared to all the other fluff that goes on, whether it be playtime, registers, golden time, this time, that time, you actually drum down to what they're actually learning, the time spent learning. I mean, forget how they're learning. The fact they're just sat in a desk looking at a board being told to recite ABC is actually quite small. It's an hour, 90 minutes tops if you're lucky on an average school day. Well, we can do that in the morning. And then whatever we do in the afternoon is extra. And we can do it in the way that Eve wants to do it, the way that Eve learns best. And we can differentiate a lot better than even the most committed, the most passionate teacher could possibly hope to do when they're looking at 30 children sat in front of them. There's a limit. But obviously for us, there's one.
Right. And the outdoors to help you along.
In the outdoors. Do you know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah. But as you know, being outdoors raises so many questions. How and why is stuff green? I mean, most people know it's chlorophyll, but why is chlorophyll green? Do you know what I mean? And it leads to a lot of other really quite deeper questions, and that's actually tangible. You're not just looking at text or in a book. It's real. It's there. You can touch it. And when you're looking at a proper information board, looking at whatever it is in front of you, trying to read about it, you're not just reading in a textbook and it's some abstract little thing that's not really relevant to you sat at that desk in the school in the middle of a city. It's there, it's real. So when you're reading it, you're learning it, she can see it coming to life before her. So it fires up more imagination and what she's thinking, and then it leads on to other stuff. And it's amazing, even map reading. Math goes into map reading when you're looking at longitude, latitude, grid references, bearings. Do you know what I mean? That's all math, really, isn't it? And then reading the place names and counting your footsteps, it's all math. So it's quite simple to integrate when you actually take the time.
Absolutely. This year, you guys are hiking all of Scotland's Great Trails. So can you tell us about those? Tell us about the Great Trails. What is this?
Well, Scotland's Great Trails, I've got to confess that I know a bit about them, but I probably don't know as much as I should know about them because of the timescale we had in order to organise what we're doing this year, because we had other stuff that we were thinking about doing until we changed to the Scotland's Great Trails. But Scotland's Great Trails are the long-distance trails for Scotland that have received the award of being one of Scotland's Great Trails for whatever reason. I don't know the exact criteria.
Sure. But they're designated by Scotland. Scotland said, these are the great trails. Here they
are, yeah. Basically, yeah. I mean, for example, like the West Highland Way. Most people have heard of the West Highland Way. It is one of the most famous of Scotland's great trails. I mean, it's only like 90, 100 miles, so it's not particularly long in terms of American trails, but add them all together and you've got about 2,000 miles of Scotland's great trails. So it's a bit under what is, well, the Appalachian Trail. It's a little bit shorter than that. But obviously it's all over Scotland and there's various sort of intricacies you've got to be aware of because some of them fork off and there's two different parts and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, they go all over the place. They crisscross Scotland. Some of them are urban. Some of them are out in the sticks and out in the wild going across hills and mountains. It's very diverse, and one of the trails is even a canoe trail. So we'll be doing about 100 miles in a canoe, cool. which I'm quite looking forward to. So yeah,
and you're doing the hike for charity this year.
We're doing it, yeah. Well, we always try and do stuff for charity. We've done stuff for charity for years, and we've raised it's got to be tens of thousands of pounds by now. But I mean, last year we raised about £15,000. We did that for the National Autistic Society. This year we're doing it for for Scottish Autism to raise money for them, because it's a Scottish challenge, so it's specifically Scottish charity. So we're doing it to raise money for them, and obviously talk about autism and its impact and try and raise a bit of awareness, challenge some stereotypes and it's doing well. We've got a nice little following, and so it's doing well. We've got a film crew coming out to us on Tuesday, so going to be followed with cameras and boom mics and all that sort of stuff on Tuesday. So we're quite looking forward to that. So yeah, so we do try and make ourselves available as much as we can.
And you noted a little bit ago that Eve has a vote in everything. So I know this was not the adventure you originally planned, as you just mentioned. So I'm wondering what was originally planned? And I know Eve vetoed it, but what was the original plan?
We thought about going to Ireland and doing north to south, because last year we did an end-to-end the UK, so we walked from the entire length from the most northerly to the most southerly via John O'Groats to Land's End, which is kind of the quintessential British journey. So we did that last year. So we were looking at doing a long distance trail this year. So we were looking at doing Ireland, and we were also, the other idea was to go into Europe and do the, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, the Camino de Santiago. It starts in France and basically goes through Spain and whatever. So we were toying with that, but in the end we chose the Great Trails, or Eve did, even though it's the longest, and we're doing that one.
Yeah.
So that was the other two. We were going to through hike the length of Ireland, which would have been about 1,200 miles, the route we had planned, or obviously going into Europe. I'm not sure how far that one is, about 600 miles, I think. But yeah, so we ended up in Scotland. Next year, don't know. There is, at the moment, there's a discussion next year of, albeit very briefly, of going to Nepal to try and get to the Everest base camp.
Because Eve is fascinated with Everest. Eve loves Everest. She's got a picture of her bed, if I remember reading that.
Yeah, that's her obsession. Everest. She wants to go up it. You ask her independently. It's one of the best conversation topics you can have with Eve, is get her talking about Everest. She knows the different names of it in the different languages and that, and she knows it. She wants to go up it. She doesn't talk to people like at all. She's pretty much non-verbal with strangers, but she has gone online and she's spoken to Sherpas over at Everest. There's a female doctor that puts together all female teams, mainly disadvantaged females, that Eve spoke to, and she's got involved with her, that do Everest attempts. So she's got our backing and our blessing, and we'll support her if she wants to try and get up there.
Yeah.
So next year we might be. I don't know. It's been a very brief discussion, but we might be going to.
You got a whole. You have when we're recording this, it's February. You have a whole year to think about it. So
we do. Well, currently what we're doing, hoping to be finished by Christmas, because obviously we don't set massive time scales on what we're doing, because it's a lifestyle choice. It's not, let's get this done and let's get back to normal life, or let's get back into the education. This is what we do. So we don't push it. So although we could push it a lot harder and probably guarantee will be done by October or whatever, we don't push it to be done by a certain date, just because it's a lifestyle, and at the end of the day she is still only 9 years old and we don't want to break her. But usually she's the one that keeps us going. If there's anyone that's going to break, it is usually me, to be honest. So it's not her.
What has doing all of this taught you about working with your own neurodivergence, with your own autism?
Oh God, it challenges you in ways that, like we spoke about earlier, that you just don't really get when you're in a town or in a city or just live in the 9 to 5, because you just kind of, in autism it's called masking. You're just copying people. You're trying to just fit in. But in the outdoors you don't have to do that. You can just be a bit more yourself. But it does force you to overcome certain challenges. Not masking, that's a big difference, but overcome some of them, because obviously if it's windy and rainy you have to just get on with it. Because last year when we were doing the John O'Groats to Land's End, I can remember sitting in a tent one night and I was just crying, thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? My pack was like well over 20 kilos. I was carrying winter gear for me and Eve, 2 winter bags, 2 air beds. The tent was getting buffeted nearly down. We were coming around the coast of Scotland and we were hanging onto fences because of the wind and the mudslide. And I just cried. It was just too much. But at the end of the day, you've got to get up the next morning and get going again. You've got to be there for Eve, and do you know what I mean? So, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing or it's a wrong thing, because at the end of the day, I'm a man, I cried, so what? Men do, and I'm not afraid to admit my weaknesses, and when I'm scared or fearful. And I think it's important for even to hear that and know that and appreciate emotions and feelings, because I think as I certainly struggle to interpret it, Eve definitely struggles to interpret it. So I think having it a bit more visible is a good thing.
Yeah.
So I do try and wear my heart on my sleeve a bit more, and certainly putting it out publicly on social media, which is what we try and do every single day. It's difficult when I've written it all and I've said that I've really struggled on this bit. It's hard to press that publish button, really hard, because you don't know who's reading that.
Right.
And it's difficult. It's really difficult.
Right, but I hear what you're saying completely. I think part of the power of nature is that, autism or not, anyone who spends a lot of time outside has been in a situation where they are not entirely comfortable and possibly crying. When you talk about the outdoors and let it strip away, whether it is a quote unquote mask because of autism or just this mask that we all put up to say our lives are perfect, that's a connection to other humans that you don't get outside of those common outdoor moments. And you published a post recently that I just read about a hike through Glasgow. You're doing a section hiking through Glasgow. You were on a section of the trail that is, but mostly the trail does not exist. It was covered in trash. It was not a lovely day. You did not like being there. It was not the kind of trail that you like to do, which is in the nature and the wilderness. It was more city walking. And you caveated the beginning of this post as saying, I feel very negative. But when I was reading that, what I was thinking was, he sounds very real. Like, this isn't negativity. This is just what happened. And those are, sometimes they're the same thing. But that commonality is what makes what you guys are doing so powerful, which is this connectiveness that you're working through challenges. Yours and mine are different, but everybody has a challenge that they're working through. And heading outside can sure help.
That's it. I remember that post. I think I even wrote that up. I was walking and felt quite vulnerable, I believe, or something like that. But it's true, and I think that people do. And I think regardless of how big and tough you think you are, I think people do feel vulnerable. They do have times when they struggle, and if by saying it out loud it can help just one person, then good. And that, but at the end of the day, it is real, and I do try and present it as real as I possibly can, but trying to be pragmatic and make it readable. And it's difficult, it takes a long time, but hopefully people get something from it. And if they hear me talking about it and trying to say what it's like, and they see that in themselves, maybe it will help them. And yeah, hopefully it does. Hopefully it gets them outside as well, because to be honest, yeah, they get them outside into nature and they were doing good.
There's all sorts of neurodivergence that aren't autism. And I don't want to say that anybody has an experience that might be the same. And I also don't want to talk about medicine as if it replaces, like, nature as medicine replacing a doctor. But we talk about how it's an actual beneficial quote unquote treatment without actually being replacing medicine. Okay, so with all of those caveats, with all of them, in your experience, why should neurodivergent humans look to the outdoors as a type of medicine? Why should they do it? Why should people listening to this pursue that?
Well, I think that everyone, regardless of neurodivergent or not, could look and should be looking to the outdoors and just deliver a more wholesome life where you embrace the outdoors, because like we said before, it is what we are meant to be doing. It is who we are. And I think we can cocoon ourselves in these bricks and mortar buildings with our TVs and our iPhones and all the rest of it, and think we're something different and do something special, and we're not. I mean, it was only a few hundred years ago at best. We were still chopping trees down for firewood and stuff like that. And do you know what I mean? It's who we are, and it's what we're meant to be doing. And forget the medical side. If you just look at the facts of the science of endorphins and all the hormones that you get when you're being outdoors and you're living more normally and just experiencing it, it's psychologically so beneficial for happiness, for morale. I mean, I don't want to sound like a hippie or just go on too much, but but just give it a go. Just get out there and give it a go, and just feel the benefit for yourself. And don't go out there with the negative attitude of this is a bit hippie, or I don't like doing this, and yada yada. Just try it. Take your shoes and socks off and walk on the grass, and actually think, how do you actually feel? And actually think about it. And then obviously the benefits that you can then take home with you. It's just I don't know. I could go on and on, and it's just, do you know what I mean? It's just right. It's just, I mean, you honestly, people that go outside and spend time outside, you tell me one person that genuinely isn't going to benefit in some way, even if they do it in their own way, because it doesn't have to be big. I mean, we try and live outside as much as you can do, but it doesn't have to be big. Just go for a walk around your park. Do you know what I mean? Just go and sit in your garden. Go and plant some plants on your balcony if that's what you've got in your flat, or buy a pot plant for in your house. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be grand, but just try the best you can. Just bring a bit of the outdoors indoors if that's all you can do, because the benefit you can gain, it is factual. It is scientifically proven. So embrace it, and embrace who we are and what we are. We're no different to the animals and the birds and the bees, and just enjoy the outdoors. Enjoy just getting out there, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. I mean, I know there's a lot of big marketing gimmicks out there that you need this, that, and the other for getting outdoors, but the reality is, the more you get into it, the more you realise you don't need it, right, and you can cast it off.
How can listeners support you?
So, yeah, we're on social media, so you can go onto Facebook and Instagram, give us a like, give us a follow. We've got a website you can subscribe to. We've got a Buy Me a Coffee account, so you can buy us a cup of coffee or a hot chocolate free if you want. They're kind of, I think, the main ways that we get tons of messages. So if you want to contact us to have a chat, or we're here, we do try as best we can to respond to every single email message that we get. So
yeah,
support us, and we'll do our best to support you. So we're always here. Yeah, and if you've got a few spare quid, we do enjoy a good cup of coffee as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
out on the trail for sure.
And obviously, rounding it all off, at the end of the day, what we do is for charity. We've got a Just Giving page. So if you're feeling that way inclined, we've got a Just Giving page. Go and have a look and see what you think.
Ian, thank you so much for joining us today. As a final thing, would you describe for us a favorite outdoor moment that you've had, maybe on the trail with Eve, or, I mean, really anywhere that you like to think about, something you like to go back to?
I think that we get asked this all the while by people we meet, messages we get sent. And the reality is, I can't honestly turn and say there is a best place, because it depends on how it feels. I would say recently the best feeling we had was getting to the end of the other day when we were walking, because we were just finished with it. But there's been other times when we've been donated a lodge to stay in after we've done a whole day's walk. It's been throwing it down, freezing cold, the wind chills put it well below freezing, and then you come into this lovely little wooden cabin with the heating on, and they've left a bar of chocolate on the counter in the kitchen. And oh my God, the feeling is overwhelmingly. Do you know what I mean? So that's what it's about. It's not about the location. It's not about what you can see. It's about how it feels. And if it feels good, then it's the best time in the world. But one thing that I do get, and I would say absolutely, is the best feelings come after the hardest work or the biggest challenges. You're not going to get them unless you've worked, unless you've actually put something into it, or you're starting to struggle, because it doesn't come easily. So the harder you work, the better the reward. So challenge yourself, because you'll have the best time of your life afterwards.
Ian, thank you so much for being on Humans Outside with me today. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. It's a privilege, so it's really nice talking to you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. Help me out by leaving a 5-star rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help other listeners find the podcast too. Now, go, get outside. Until next time, we'll see you out there.